All right, so these are the three groups that you have with us today, and I think we're going to start. So just a little history of how the three of us got to be working together. So the College Innovation Network, which Nicole, I'm going to say a little bit about, but then I can kind of turn it over to you to talk about in a little more detail. It is a research arm of Western Governors University and their labs organization that is really focused on helping connect higher education institutions with high impact education products, particularly those that focus on areas of student success and belonging. So it's almost like a matchmaking organization that brings these folks together and then helps facilitate the initial implementation of that product at the institution and provides wonderful wraparound services, including the ability to bring a research team to the table. So it's not just about the implementation of that solution, but really digging deep to study are we achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve with that product, and doing it in a very rigorous and meaningful way, and then publishing the results of that research so that other institutions can learn from it and potentially start to adopt solutions that will give them the same outcomes and opportunities down the line. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Nicole, if you want to talk a little bit more about the College Innovation Network, but then also to talk us through concepts of belonging for those folks in the audience that maybe aren't as familiar with what it is and why it matters.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you described it very well of what we're doing here at the College Innovation Network. So it's been a real great privilege to be working with both InScribe and Rio Salado College. And the College Innovation Network, we're really focused on helping support institutions, as you mentioned, matching them with products that are addressing true student needs that they have. And I think, we had kind of this natural evolution. We were founded in 2020, and we had this natural evolution towards really focusing on belonging and engagement in higher education. So we were founded right before the pandemic started and everyone went online, and, education just kind of had to figure out a new way to kind of move forward with really highly integrated online learning and ed tech products. And throughout the College Innovation Network, we have been working with leaders such as Janelle and other folks at the institutions in our network, and consistently belonging and engagement came up. And I think this is a need that has grown over the last couple of years, especially since we've been founded, as more folks are doing online learning kind of at scale, such as universities like Rio Salado. And then we know that learning is a very social process. Students really need that connection, but they also want the flexibility of online remote learning as well. And we think that ed tech has a lot of potential to help kind of solve some of those connection issues as higher ed moves into more of this online tech-enabled environment. So College Innovation Network is really focused on promoting belonging and engagement among students. And we, as you mentioned, provide really strong wraparound services, all the way from identifying the key need that should be addressed so we can have the biggest impact, finding innovative ed tech companies such as InScribe, matching them, helping support implementation. And then, our true kind of bread and butter is the research evaluation process. And that's what we're going to focus on a lot today, is the research study that we did evaluating the impact of InScribe at Rio Salado. So we'll share all the research details of that, but our big goal is to publish those results so other leaders can see what we've done and following what we're doing, showing that we can have a big impact by getting students connected online. So I'll pause there. And then, do we want to introduce the other folks, or do we want to just move right into belonging?
Let's move into belonging.
Awesome.
I will just give I have to, from our perspective, say how I can't underscore how valuable it was to us to have the research team brought into the mix, because, as a company, we're really busy. We don't always have the resources to apply. And I find that that's true often with some of the institutions we work with. They have so much going on that their own research teams are taxed and don't always have the bandwidth to do everything they want to do. And so having that additional resource and expertise that could guide that process and keep us on track was just phenomenal. So that's been such a great partnership. Thank you, Nicole.
And, one of the things with the College Innovation Network is every year we host an in-person convening where everyone gets together, and it's really a collaborative working meeting. And this year we focused on trying to figure out as a network, what does belonging mean to us as a network? And this was based off of, the 2 years of collaboration we've had with different institutions and different companies. And what we've come up with together is that student belonging is when students have positive and purposeful connections to the institution and also believe that their authentic self is validated and elevated by its community. And, belonging has become very popular kind of in higher ed, and there's a really deep, rich research history of belonging. But I love this definition, especially for us moving forward and working with different companies. And, students, and this is something that we really saw as we'll get into some of the student kind of feedback on the InScribe community at Rio Salado, is students really just want to hear from other students that are like them. They want to know that there's other people that they can talk to, get support from. They can share their experiences and their story, and feel really validated and know that someone else is out there listening as well. Because while online learning can be super flexible and really advantageous for students, sometimes it can be a little isolating because you don't have those spontaneous connections that you may have in an in-person environment. So I think, it's been really nice to see students really connecting with the idea of just being able to support and chat with other students. Some of it's academic based, just getting kind of practical insights, but a lot of the time students just want to know that there's other students that support them, that are having similar experiences as they are, and just know that they're not alone in their online learning journey. So I think for us, this definition, I love this definition. And I think this is something that, is really positive in helping us move forward with our research. So I think a lot of, these messages we're going to see come up as we move into the research.
Yeah. And what's been interesting too for us is we also have a heavy focus on non-traditional and online students who don't have as much opportunity to collaborate in person. But what we've heard from people is that even in-person students can sometimes struggle with this, like the imposter syndrome, the feeling that I'm the only one that's maybe nervous or have anxiety. And so when you give them spaces to connect virtually, sometimes you encourage voices from students who otherwise are too shy or nervous to speak up. So you can see some of the same benefits there as well.
So there's a chat or a Q&A question is what I should say. The chat is now enabled.
Chat, everybody.
Yes. So please, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and post your questions in the chat. But Nicole, does this sense of belonging apply to students taking self-paced courses as well? And is that a documented need for them?
Absolutely. And I think with the online kind of self-paced way in which education is kind of evolving, and a lot of leading universities like Rio Salado are doing the online self-paced. And I would say it's even more important in those kind of environments, this sense of belonging, because again, students love the flexibility. They love that school can work around their schedule, but they still want to know that there's other people in their situation. There's other working parents, other folks that are working full time, other people that are maybe just unclear about, something in their class and just want to connect about something. Because again, that learning is a social process. And while we have the technology and the means to do learning very independently and on our own schedule, we still want that sense of human connection. It's so foundational to how we approach learning and how we approach just, kind of our life in general, that having these spaces like these virtual communities that are dedicated for students to connect with one another are really, really important. I would say it's even more important in kind of the online self-paced education environments.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. And thank you, Danielle. Keep them coming as they come in, please. So I'll click through your stuff for you. And then if you want me to go a little faster, you just let me know, Nicole.
Absolutely. And part of what we have some of this research in the report, but part of why we're focused on belonging in particular is because there's so much research-backed evidence of the importance for belonging for student success. And being in higher education, we care that our students are reaching their goals and succeeding in the efforts that they set out. And we know from just so much research, again, in the report, we can drop the research link report in the chat. I think we'll have a QR code later for you to download as well. But we know that students who have a better sense of belonging have more friends on campus, have that connection in their learning environment, they're more likely to persist through their courses, more likely to persist through their degree or credential programs. I think something that Katie, you mentioned before, if some of the students that are maybe a little more shy, for instance, having these alternative ways to connect with students can actually be much more inclusive and help promote more equitable outcomes for students. Because some students, if you're in like a big lecture hall in person, raising your hand is a large process and a very nerve-wracking process for a lot of students, for example. But we can have students that are, maybe a little bit more shy, maybe a little more introverted, still fully participate on their own time in these communities, which I think is really wonderful. We also know students, if they're more dedicated and feel like they have that sense of community, that their authentic self is validated, they're more likely to engage in campus and with the institution and other events as well, which is also important. And overall, just higher grades because they're more engaged with their learning. So these are kind of those high level kind of research summary findings, but that's one of the reasons that we're so focused on working with companies and working with universities and colleges that are focused on promoting belonging, is because we know that they are linked to good outcomes. And that's what we want for our students as we're working with them, is for them to succeed in their educational goals that they set out. So belonging is very important for helping facilitate all of those.
Awesome. Yeah. I feel like everyone on this call can relate to this idea of being somewhere and being nervous to raise your hand or speak up, and for students who are living that every day, it's just, you just want to be sensitive to it. And as you said, give them alternative models for connection. So that's great.
We do have a question that came in through the chat, and I know that we've slightly touched on this. So if Katie, if you could elaborate, that'd be awesome. The attendee says that they're recognizing that their in-person students are still struggling to reconnect since COVID. Have you had success with virtual spaces for in-person students as well?
Absolutely. And, I'll be totally honest that when we really started this process, my focus as a CEO was very much on the online population and the non-traditional student population. But after we started working with some institutions that support both types of learners, we found that the in-person students were also craving these opportunities to connect. They're sort of on both sides of the coin. One, they're also feeling more isolated after COVID. I think they're more aware of those feelings, and so looking for other ways to kind of get past that. But at the same time, they're also used to a much more on-demand, virtual, more convenient modality of engaging and learning. And so the benefits are kind of twofold for them as well, that they also get a space where they can come when and where they need it, but have opportunity to greater connection. The other thing, really quickly, I'll say that we've learned is that I think at a lot of institutions sort of think about, well, we have our online students and we have our in-person students, and they're sort of separate, or we have our business students and our nursing students, and those are separate student populations. But what we've seen in these communities is it's very much the more the merrier, and these students actually enjoy meeting each other and mixing and learning across some of those buckets that we would normally place students in and maybe manage separately. So the other benefit of a space like this is it gives you the opportunity to give a even broader mix of students the chance to meet each other and work and support each other.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I think higher ed, we have a lot of online only, we have a lot of in-person still, but especially after the last 2 years now, we're, moving back into kind of a post-ish pandemic world. There's a lot more hybrid. There's a lot of things that are happening online, some in-person, a mix. And I think having these virtual spaces can help students connect across all of these different areas, because a lot of colleges and universities have some online programs, some in-person programs, services, events. So making sure that students have access to all students in that campus community, whether it be online or in person, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So and if you have other questions about belonging, we're not done talking about it, but definitely keep bringing them to the table. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit and kind of turn our attention to Rio Salado College and what was unique about that institution. So Janelle, if you don't mind jumping in and talking to us a little bit about the school, the makeup of your students, and how you decided that this was a project that you wanted to take on and something that would benefit you guys.
Sure, thank you.
Apparently we also have a poll that I didn't realize was going to pop up. So one of the things we're going to talk about here is Janelle's awesome ability to get her institution organized around an initiative, which I know can be very challenging for folks. So if you've been thinking about student success and engagement and trying out some of these initiatives, are there things that are preventing you from being able to do that? Like, is it money? Is it resource? Is it just not really knowing how to pilot something and understand if it's effective? So if you don't mind just dropping into the chat any of the experiences you have there, that would be great. And now I will turn it back over to you, Janelle.
Thank you, Katie. I look forward to the discussion on those responses. As Katie mentioned, I work with Rio Salado College. We're a 2-year public community college in Tempe, Arizona. We were founded in 1978 as a college without walls and have been an innovative leader in distance education even before the internet. So our model is really asynchronous, individualized calendars, and more student to faculty interaction than true student to student interaction inside of the course model. We serve on average about 37,000 students annually. 45% of them are first-gen learners, first-generation college attending students, and about 60% are online learners in that asynchronous model. Also, about 89% of our students are attending part-time due to other obligations, right, in their busy lifestyles. So where we started with the College Innovation Network, we have a very innovative entrepreneurial orientation. We wanted to join the College Innovation Network to help see if there was any other solutions out there in this space to help us solve towards increasing peer-to-peer engagement. What we appreciated about their approach was they start with that user-centered design process, and we spent some deep time analyzing the need. Coming into the network, Rio was aware that our students, through focus groups and end of course surveys, as well as alumni surveys, were telling us that they wish there were a way for a little bit more student to student interaction in our model. But due to our whole teaching and learning delivery model, that would be difficult for us to be able to implement across the board in all of our disciplines and courses. We actually have over 600 courses online. So we offer a lot of those needs, and a lot of students come to us part-time because they're seeking credits that they can transfer to another institution. In fact, we have about, I think 70% of our learners are not at our institution to complete credentials with us. And I'm telling you all this because it created a unique set of challenges for us to build community where a student might not ever come on campus or have a need or desire to, or might not really associate themselves with seeking a credential at our institution. So we wanted to really experiment and see if we could still improve the sense of belonging and community in this entirely online individualized experience. So we listened to students, we did focus groups. The College Innovation Network also helped us to do a little bit of student research at the front end. We also talked to faculty to help us identify that solution. I'll speak a high level, and if we want to dig in deeper during Q&A, we can. But finding the solution was a great added value from the College Innovation Network. They actually helped facilitate the RFI process, the request for information, and then the request for proposals with vendors in this space. And we narrowed it down to 2 vendors that we then pulled into our shared governance decision-making process at the institution. And we decided to try InScribe. We started with a small student population that was out of state online because they would never have the opportunity to come on campus. And I think there was 700 learners in that first semester, but we grew the communities very quickly once we understood that basically the administrative workload and how we would need to moderate the communities and design the space. And I think one of the smartest things we did, and I would encourage you to do in every opportunity you can, we engaged student leaders on campus. And that was a big part of our success story. Is we actually had our honors and PTK, Phi Theta Kappa chapter student leaders, our elected student senator, help design the space. And so that was interesting because going into it, I thought we would have to really architect and design and engineer all of this interaction, just like you would in instructional design. But we found that that's not what the students wanted, and we'll learn more later, but they actually wanted to have a space that they could design. It ended up becoming like our virtual student union and adding a tremendous value in that way. And then finally, again, the CIN helped us measure the impact through scientific research. And right now we've measured belonging, but what we're working on now that we're about a year into it, we're going to be measuring some of the student success metrics as well. So that's kind of a high level how we went through our implementation process, or that full plan, do, check, act cycle. But let me know if there's any questions. I see some chats coming up, or we can.
Yeah, so I'll bring up the, I sort of jumped the gun there a little bit, but I'll bring up the slide that shows the solution that you landed on, Janelle, with RioConnect. I think one of the posts I think I saw in the chat, which we definitely hear a lot, is a concern that it's going to take a lot of time and energy from the institution to manage and oversee the space, and that they just don't have the resources to kind of do that over the long term. So be curious what your experience has been there.
Yeah, now we're identifying resources who actively want to nurture these communities. But you know, when you're in that initial strategic initiative pilot test phase, we were really sensitive to make sure we weren't asking more of folks who, of course, we were just sliding into a pandemic. It was a hard time to launch a strategic initiative. Another thing that we talked about, which hopefully we can loop back to that poll, but for Rio, 2 of our strategic goals were completion, increasing completion, trying to get more of those credential seeking students to complete, and then as well as a focus, a strategic goal of increasing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it perfectly aligned with the work we were doing in our 2020 strategic plan. I want to note here, Katie, when working with the students, we also tried to do some crowd sourcing. We did a social media, name the platform kind of contest. And that also helped because we had branded it. We gave it our skin and brand. And so it was more meaningful because it was named by our student population. And we worked with, of course, our marketing team, but that might seem like a small thing, but it's really helped us to build more ownership at the institution, that it's something that we own. At Rio, we also are probably less than 1% of higher ed institutions that has its own LMS. So we have a proprietary learning management system. And so integration was really important for us, knowing that we had our own ecosystem. How well could we integrate this platform? You can see here that it's available through mobile devices, but we can talk more about how we made sure to integrate it in our launch plan and our communication strategy. And going single sign-on was a major factor for us to do this really smoothly. And Katie, your team had been amazing, and we were just really impressed with the level of service that we got in implementing the platform and having single sign-on and making it work as part of our homegrown ecosystem as well.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on some really important points. And I saw a post also in the chat that I think that this is relevant for, which is what I heard that I really loved is RioConnect is for the students, for all the students, and also by the students. So they had a real voice in the design, the branding, and it felt like an authentic space to them, which is really important if you want your students to leverage the community as a place where they feel like they can talk to each other and own it. So Rio did such a nice job of that. But also this idea that you started with the population who maybe had the least amount of time and was never going to come to campus. Because I did see in the chat someone saying, you know, with, I can't remember the term, right. So part-time students or students who maybe are coming and going a little bit, they're so busy, they're so diverse that there's sometimes a worry that they won't even have time to access this. But all the things that you did in terms of make it available on mobile, integrated into the systems you're already using, welcome them in from the start, I think is what made that population really gravitate towards it. I don't know if that was your experience as well.
Yeah, we were surprised that we didn't have to engineer it more. Honestly, we thought there'd be much more of a lift on our, and you can do many applications, but that was a welcome surprise where we realized there were so many ways to utilize the platform, and you could do, and now we're evolving into more, I think, curated experiences that are involving our faculty and our field of interest advisors, et cetera.
Awesome.
I was going to share also what we did. We made a strategic decision when we launched more broadly to keep that feature on where all of the students would be, we added them. So we like auto added the whole semester's worth of students. And then we kept on the feature where they would get an email communication that something was posted in this platform. And we heard back from students that didn't love that feature, but it's very easy to opt out. I think once other students who might not normally make the time saw the nature of the conversations, they were more likely to engage as well.
Yes. Awesome.
So real quick, I'm going to interrupt.
Oh yeah.
So you did cover most of the poll questions. We did have one that mentioned budget and institutional alignment. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Oh yeah. Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, and again, that's part of why we wanted to join the College Innovation Network, was a grant-funded experience that helped us launch this with no cost to the institution. It was challenging, honestly, to navigate the purchasing processes within our own institution, but we've been able to keep the platform grant funded as we go into year 2 of its application. And so we continue to seek grants, and I think that's a really elegant solution for us to not have to invest in another technology platform. Excuse me.
Thank you. And then there's another question that came in just to the host and the panelists. Can you speak to monitoring the space? So this person is in the K-12 space and they're concerned about bullying. Oh, did we lose Janelle?
Oh, we might have lost Janelle. She'll be back. So,
right.
Oh,
I'm here. Sorry, I had a dog that needed to go out, and that's one of the risks from working from home. Okay, so yeah, again, we thought that we would have to allocate more human resources, but what we actually did was we used part of the grant funding and we gave a stipend to these student leaders to nurture the community. What we were trying to learn was how much time would it take per week? Would we need a professional administrative support staff to do this as part of other duties as assigned or whatnot? They said on average, they spend about 2 hours per week in the community, but they also generated a lot of content, responded to other student content. You can see here, we also had marketing, leveraging the platform as a way to do outreach to the variety of student engagement activities we were hosting virtually during the pandemic. And so marketing really appreciated this is another social vehicle for them to engage students. And then the actual student moderation, which we did by students, and I would highly recommend that, only took them about 2 hours per week. What we're moving into is we're going to experiment further with some advisors who are trained by the field of study to start nurturing communities by field of study. And then we're also exploring engaging more with our university transfer partners. I saw ASU was on the call, so that's an exciting opportunity for some of our university transfer partners, perhaps to reach into students who can help them bridge into transfer sooner or be made aware of scholarship opportunities and other bridging opportunities to keep them on track for success.
awesome.
Janelle, do you find that students behave inappropriately, or is there any type of bullying happening in the communities?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we're not seeing more of that. We did establish a code of conduct statement and we worked with those student leaders. We've also put together some SOPs or standard operating procedures. Of course, we want to have a certain level of polished proofreading and also branding to try to make sure that it's staying at a high level of quality. I'm really surprised to date, knock on wood, we have not had any instances of student conduct issues or even students being negative to one another. I think we talked about this loneliness epidemic and so many people were just talking about things that were not even related to school and just building connection. And I think that they really valued seeing that there's other people out there like me struggling with the same things I'm trying to balance. And so there was a ton of peer-to-peer support happening just organically in the environment.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And I think Janelle's experience is really similar to other institutions that, it's hard to prove the negative, but I think because, to your point, Janelle, the sites are branded with the university or the college, they're integrated into your systems. There's a certain level of like professionalism, I guess, that oversees it. This is a school space. and students bring them back their best selves to these communities. And we just see that time and time again. I want to make sure we get to the meat of the research study. So I'm going to go a little faster through some of our slides talking about the communities. And Janelle, you did a great job touching on this already, where these spaces are, you see a certain set of conversations being generated in these spaces, and we see that over and over again. So just trying to make new social connections and connect with folks. I think you probably had some great examples of people like all over the country reaching out and connecting with each other and getting to know each other. But then also, some practical pieces where sometimes the best person to answer your question is actually another student who has been there and done that. So you must see a lot of students asking questions about courses and things like that as well. Is that right, Janelle?
Yeah, and usually they're trying to get books on the cheap or whatnot, right? Or like know about a course experience before they take that one. Just a few things I want to point out super quick. You can emote inside of the post. So a lot of students would just interact by an emoji or emoting on another student's post. And then we really appreciated, you could see how many people have viewed each post. So there's some really good analytical data that was early indicators of student adoption of the platform as well.
Yeah, and I know those views were also really critical for the marketing stuff that you talked about, where you wanted to promote these really great opportunities for your students, and knowing that 4,000 of them saw this post and you were able to reach them, it's very satisfying, I'm sure.
Well, we actually saw a lift. Like we have struggled to get students, especially if they're working, right, to attend events virtually during the middle of the day. But we could post something on there and say the event's happening in 2 hours. We started to see more students engage in our virtual synchronous activities as well.
Awesome. And then of course, like, especially when we're talking about belonging, there are always those students who are really willing to be vulnerable and kind of put themselves out there with their fellow students and lead the way on that. And so this is such a great post. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I think Nicole can share later. The average age of the student who engaged was surprising. At Rio, I think our average age of student was 27 years old on average, but we saw a much older demographic adopting this platform and finding value in it.
Yeah, it's lovely. And those are some of my favorite posts, when we just see people reaching out and saying like, hey, either I'm really nervous because I'm coming back at this age, or I'm so excited because I'm coming back at this age. And they always tend to get like the most interaction and other folks jumping in to participate. Wonderful. So that was a really quick overview of the RioConnect platform. We talked a little bit about how it's integrated into the systems Rio's already using. Janelle, I know you guys did a big marketing push around just letting students know it was there, but then it's really about them kind of finding it and coming to it organically. And that worked really well, I think, for your users. All of this, though, was for a purpose. It wasn't just community for community's sake. We really wanted to move the needle on some folks, on some measures, particularly around engagement and belonging. So let's talk a little bit about that. We did a research study. We're going to talk more about the research study, but the sort of punchline, I guess, if you will, is that after only 6 weeks of having the community live, we saw a big uptick in the measures of belonging and peer connectedness for those students who were participating in the community versus those who were not. So let's dig in a little bit to the study and how that all worked. Nicole, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can give us an overview of what we've done. So, we had the RioConnect community. We did this research when we had rolled out the community to all online learners. And we really took advantage of kind of the natural progression of, students kind of, self-selecting into the communities. And so we had the community open to about over 7,000 students in late August 2021. And then we did a pre and post design. So again, that claim on that previous slide that we see an increase in belonging and peer connectedness is because we are doing this pre and post design so we can track change over time in the same students. So in about mid-September, we sent out our initial baseline survey, and then we followed up with them about 6 weeks later. to see how, their peer connectedness, their ratings of belonging. We have several survey measures that you can see in the full report. You can get all those survey measures that we use to see how students, their belonging and peer connectedness changed over time. And what was really great about kind of the design that we did is, we roll out the community to all 7,000 students. We have a group that, super motivated and joined in right away when the community is launched. We have a handful of students that, don't participate in the community. And then we have some students that decided to join a little bit later, right? So they see maybe some of their friends, maybe they're getting some more emails about it and decide to join the community a little later. So what was really cool, if we want to click over to the next slide there, is we kind of ended up with 3 interesting groups over this 6-week period. So you can see what we had is students that engaged right away at time 1, our time 1 survey, and again at time 2. We had that middle group of students that didn't engage initially at time 1, but by the time we surveyed them, they had joined the community sometime in that 6-week period. And then we had the group of students who participated in both surveys, but didn't ever join into the RioConnect community. So we were able to really compare, and this gets us closer to understanding, kind of the causal effect of being engaged in a community and the impact on belonging and engagement. So the final survey in that right-hand pie chart donut there, the final kind of main analysis was done on this little over 200 students across those 3 groups. So we were able to, again, track how their belonging and engagement scores changed over time as a function of their participation and level of engagement in the community. And so on the next slide there, again, we have kind of those different terms that we put for these groups: the consistent users that are using it the whole time, the late adopters who joined in about halfway through the study period, but did complete the surveys both at time 1 and time 2. And they're, to me as a researcher, the most interesting group, because we have them participate in the baseline survey and give us their ratings of belonging, their ratings of engagement. And then we're able to see that they started using the community, and then we see a clear, significant change in their belonging and engagement. And one of the main things that changed was their engagement in the community. So we can really see with this late adopter group, the impact, statistically speaking, the impact of, the engaging in the community on their belonging and engagement scores. And again, we have kind of as a nice baseline control group, the students that did not engage in the community, but still participated in our surveys. So this is a nice group of, this is kind of what things look like before InScribe was there. And so they're still seeing all the marketing efforts, but they had it engaged in the community. And then we had, I think it was like 7 students who joined and then stopped using, which it was only, less than 10 students. So which is always, a good sign as well. So we have some kind of big stats. So as Janelle mentioned, the demographic was older than what their average student demographic was. So overall it was 56 was the average age. So I think this really does point to the desire, especially for non-traditional students, to still have that college kind of community and experience with their peers. We also had, over almost 1,000 replies and reactions to conversations, posts reviewed over 19,000 times. Resources that were shared. So this is a great way to actually get, as Janelle was mentioning, information out about different, programs, events, things like that. So this is a really useful tool to actually get students to be aware of a lot of the things that are going on. And then, 142,000 views of, these conversations. So this is great to see that students are seeing what other students are doing and what they're sharing in this community. So Janelle, did you want to add anything on anything with the community stats?
No, you're doing great. Thank you.
And then these graphs that we have on the next slide here.
Well, I'm going to say one thing really quick on this, which is don't underestimate also the power of seeing somebody else's conversation. So you don't necessarily have to be someone who is posting or responding to somebody's post. Just seeing that interaction take place between other people can have a big impact on your sense of connection and belonging as well. And so those view numbers are big, and they're really important when we think about the health of the community as well.
Absolutely. Because as we mentioned earlier with, what belonging is, for some students, belonging is just seeing another student share their experience, and that's good for them. Like, that's what helps them and get that sense of belonging. So what makes us feel like we belong may differ for each student. So as you mentioned, we don't want to underestimate the power of just viewing conversations and seeing other students engaged. For many students, that's really, really significant for them.
Awesome.
And so these two graphs, these are kind of like the main event of the report. You're mentioning, showing how students' belonging and engagement changed over the course of this 6-week study period. So on the x-axis here, we have the time 1 and the time 2 surveys. So this is, early on, and then time 2 is 6 weeks later. And then their overall belonging scores on a 1 to 5 scale, higher being reporting higher belonging. And we have that graph on the left-hand side, and then peer connectedness on the right-hand side. And again, both of these are like a compilation of a few measures, which you can find in the report as well. And for belonging and peer connectedness, that late adopter group, which is that middle bar, so the medium blue bar, you see that very clear incline, and that's a statistically significant incline over time. So these students filled out the survey, told us how they're feeling in terms of their belonging and engagement and connectedness. And then they start participating in the community. And then when we survey them again, they have a statistically higher rating of belonging and engagement, which is really indicative of the impact that engaging in this community. And again, that engagement can look very different from just reading, emoting, commenting, sharing. So this is really powerful evidence here. And you can see the unengaged users at the bottom line, there's no change. So, which is exactly what you should expect for those that aren't engaging in the community. So I was so excited when I first ran all of these data analyses. I'm like, I think I emailed you all right away. I'm like, look at this graph. This looks so like, I'm so excited about this. So I think this is some really clean evidence of the impact of InScribe on student belonging and their sense of peer connectedness. So how much they enjoy getting to know their peers, talking to their peers, how interested they are. So I think these results are really, really fantastic. So it's encouraging to see how impactful these virtual communities are for these students.
And we had a question come into the chat, and I'd love for Janelle to answer it live. I know she answered it in the chat, but do you have alumni in the communities today?
Probably, but it wasn't designed for them. But we've decided we're going to launch a separate alumni community this summer, because we've been working really hard on building our alumni outreach and engagement strategies. That way we can curate more alumni relevant content like transfer information, job postings, externships, etc. But actually I should go back and find out if any students who have graduated are accessing our community, because they might still have their college email addresses on file. But we've decided we're going to nurture that community in a distinct way. And I'm really excited to launch that this summer. We have an actual Rio student designing the community and moderating it again, because that formula worked so well for us. So we can report back on how that goes for us. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. There's another one in here. Oh, it looks like Katie's answered it. You guys are just answering them right in the chat. Look at that. Yeah, so how much time, Katie, does it take to integrate into the LMS?
So as I said, super easy, LTI, very simple. Every LMS has a straightforward way of doing that. With Rio, a little bit different because they have their own LMS that they host. But if you're using Canvas, D2L, Blackboard, Moodle, edX, very, very easy to do.
All right, the next one's for Nicole. This one came directly to the host and the panelists. How do we understand the late adopters starting with higher belonging than the unengaged users?
Yeah, this is something that we know is something that happens with all sorts of engagement-based products and engagement-based initiatives, is students that are just naturally, we have this natural variation in terms of students, how committed or how their sense of belonging at the start. So those that rate higher on those measures are more likely to show up to your campus events, are more likely to follow up, engage, work with their peers. So we can see that kind of natural baseline, and something that we're working on with the College Innovation Network moving forward is really figuring out how do we target the students that have that lowest baseline belonging? How do we work with universities to have some of those like early metrics so we can kind of target information to get those students more likely to engage? So it's just a kind of a opt-in, a general difference that we see with any products that are opt-in based, for instance.
What can we do to
The big
pull
question.
them in a little bit more deliberately? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a big thing that we want to focus on.
There was some curiosity. Is it an introvert versus extrovert thing?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think,
That's
right.
something
So that's part of what we want to explore is like, what are the characteristics of that population and what, because we know they would benefit if they joined. So what is the hook that we need to get out there for them that's going to bring them into the fold? And I think hopefully everyone saw we had some great quotes from students just about their experience and like how they really felt like there was this space. But I also want to make sure that we get to, so you know, if you're thinking about doing this at your own institution, a few things that you want to consider, but I will say that the CIN has been super generous in sort of donating the design of the research study so that we can replicate that study with other folks who are interested in this model of student engagement. So if you want to talk to us, we're happy to share that with you. If you want to work with us, we're happy to lead that effort with you and help you kind of replicate this and measure at your own institution as well. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so
I'll take this, and I try to speak for a lot of I try to address a lot of this knowing that we were running a little behind time. We did an internal external marketing campaign. We did have a cross-functional project committee. We did follow our shared governance practices. Where we're going now in our iterate for continuous improvement, we're actually you know, because we've demonstrated that we've added some value here to the student experience, we're now evolving into a work group that is part of our shared governance focused on the digital student experience across multiple platforms at our institution. So now we can see this piece of technology at more of a macro level landscape and be really thoughtful about what belongs in InScribe community versus the public website. And we continue to use a model right now where there is a moderator that's a student paid on a stipend. And we started with the strategic alignment. We wouldn't have pursued the project at all if it didn't directly align to our strategic goal to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. What we're doing next is also measuring it against student success metrics. I think that might be a little biased because students who are probably more likely to engage to date might already be higher achieving students, but we're going to take a look and see if it does tend to have any impact to our student retention or completion. And we're getting more faculty adoption at the programmatic level, which is really exciting. One of our faculty is going to explore using a virtual community inside of a classroom for co-curricular like tutoring services. And then in that case, we would have paid tutors that would have this platform available to them to continue to support our online learners.
awesome. And you just did a wonderful job of touching on next steps as well. So thank you for doing that, Janelle. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so you probably saw this QR code throughout the presentation that will link you to the impact report. Should also be in the chat for everybody. You can also find it on the InScribe website. So highly encourage you to grab that, read through it. I know I'm just going to speak for the people on the panel. We would all be more than happy to chat with you if you have further questions about the study or what implications something like this might have for your institution. So please, I think Danielle put all of our LinkedIns in the chat. Please reach out and connect to us on LinkedIn. We want to, you know, expand this success to as many institutions and students as we can. If you have any additional questions, let us know. But more than anything, I want to thank our panelists for being here today. You guys are awesome. We love working with you, and we're excited to continue the work together and expand it across more areas and use cases at Rio Salado.